It was -6 degrees out this morning. So wherever you are, I hope you are warm and safe. And let's start our week 4 project, third person narratives. Now we're building upon our week 3 project, first person narratives, but now we're pursuing stories told from the third person perspective, he, she, they. And we're using this approach to help build upon everything that we did before, including our narrative poems. So we're going to be looking at Ernest Hemingway's model, but we're going to be applying Alice Walker's insight. Now, in regards to Hemingway, our main focus this week is the application of dialogue. You'll see that dialogue will come into play with our final project, which will be a little script. And when it comes to Alice Walker, her brilliance is her ability to combine all of the varying elements of what it means to write, almost write, period, into the context of something as seemingly kind of little as a story, a short story. We're going to be looking at Hills Like White Elephants by Ernest Hemingway and Rose Lily by Alice Walker. But let's start with our talk on dialogue. So your goal this week is to focus on dialogue. And this is what dialogue looks like. So when you're writing your dialogue, clearly identify what you're seeing on this page. Each voice is indented. Each voice, what is spoken, it is put in quotes. There is some instruction. The person speaking is identified. That doesn't necessarily always need to be the case, but just look at this. Just look at what this looks like on the page. This is how I want your dialogue to look like. Each voice indented and what is being spoken in quotes. Now, you're going to read the story this week, so I don't need to necessarily give you the entire context of the piece, and I want you to discover its secrets on your own. But what should we drink, the girl asked. She had taken off her hat and put it on the table. Now, new voice. It's pretty hot, the man said. Now she comes back in. Let's drink beer. Then he comes back in. Dos cervezas, the man said into the curtain. Now the woman on the other side of the curtain goes, big ones? And then he responds, yes, 2 big ones. So right here, a very simple dialogue where we discover a lot about what's going on in the scene. It goes on. And just looking at this, I just want you to see and remember that each new voice is indented. Each time they speak, it is indented. And what is being said is in quotes. Now, not all the time is the person speaking identified, as you'll see on this page. What did you say? I said we could have everything. We can have everything? No, we can't. We can have the whole world. No, we can't. We can go everywhere. So right there, when you read the story, you will decipher who is speaking. You're allowed to do the same because voice captures your characters, these characters that you're creating for the story, in a way that very few other elements of writing can, other than maybe description, but maybe even dialogue more so. So there are other elements, of course, that need to be applied, narrative and description. He did not say anything, but looked at the bags against the wall of the station. There were labels on them, from all the hotels where they had spent nights. Now, I put that in quotes because it's a quote from the story, but it's not quoted in the story. But it gives you a sense of time and place, obviously, and what they had been up to. And notice that Hemingway, and this is where Hemingway's brilliance comes into play, in 2 simple sentences, covers a lot of ground. I want you to, while also paying attention to building dialogue, so you will need at least 2 characters in your stories, unless you have a character who's talking to himself, which is fine too. I want you to focus on what the story is about, your theme, obviously, which many of you have already posted this week, and description. Now, what are you writing about this week? So in week 1, I kind of gave you a little flexibility to choose a theme, in week 3, to choose a theme to write about. Well, in week 4, you're actually going to develop a theme about a story that relates to our time now, right now. What is happening in our world now? So, you don't need to imagine the scenario because we're living it. I want you to have a dialogue between 2 or more people. I want you to consider the environment and describe the environment in as best you can with just enough detail. So when I'm reading it, when your classmates are reading it, I want them to fully experience what you're doing with the right amount of details. Your piece should be 1,000+ words. And I think that's kind of like a standard for us. And it should be developed enough that we as your readers can clearly point to a beginning, a middle, and an end. So there's a beginning, there's a middle, and then there's an end. That's your goal here. And we're going to be looking at that, especially as it relates to your narrative assessment forms, which I'll talk about a little bit. Now, I want you to take chances with this. Although you're writing about our time, I want you to be also experimental. And this is where Alice Walker is going to come into play. I want you to be creative. Even though you are writing about our time, take leaps. Take leaps. Where are we going? What's happening? Be adventurous and capture our time. So, in order to go deeper, let's look at Alice Walker. Now, she's not using a dialogue between characters in this piece. She has a preacher who is identified in the italics, who is doing the talking, and what is experienced throughout the piece around the italicized sections or wordings is what is going on inside of her character Rose Lily. So, dearly beloved, as the story goes, we are gathered here today, so on and so forth, right? You know the opening to the marriage vows. So you'll note here that it starts dearly beloved, comma, that's the outside voice, and then dives into Rose Lily. Dearly beloved, she dreams, dragging herself across the world. And this is the brilliance of this piece, and I hope you share this love for it, is the manner with which, in a relatively short piece, it will not take you long to read this, whole life is captured with specificity. And that's key here, specificity. We're not dragged through a generalized life experience. In a short period of time, we are caught in the web of very specific experiences as they relate to this wedding experience. So, you have Hemingway's model, but you also have Walker's approach. I want to see what works best for you. Consider them both as your guides this week, and then consider who's offering a more fulfilling approach. Maybe it's a combination, and I will be able to